Rebecca, this is not the right spot for you. This residence is rightfully my and Olivia's. Shock paralyzed me. The words hit me like a freight train plunging into my heart. Richard, the man I had formerly referred to as Dad, was walking towards the front door of the house I had paid for when I pointed to it. For 13 years, I had brought my fair share of compromise, quiet suffering, and caring into the home. Ethan stayed put at his heels. My husband is this person. Someone has collaborated with me. I was the one to blame. His gaze evaded me. If only there had been one. To make matters worse, I said under my breath, "You're joking." Grace, his mother, was acting as she awkwardly steered her cane. However, I was cognizant of her actions. I had been aware of selective memory and convenient confusion for quite some time. Her so-called dementia would manifest whenever it suited her. Also, Olivia. She paid no attention to the requirement to act. Her head up and arms crossed, she smiled like a cat that had just eaten a songbird. "You should have reviewed the deed transfer paperwork more thoroughly," she said objectively. "But I suppose that's just your inner lawyer talking. You were too preoccupied with rescuing others to remember to look out for yourself." I felt a fissure deep inside. Find peace inside. Not even heartache can break it. Silence in a nutshell. A calmness settles over the sky, right before a storm rips it apart. Over the years, I had carved out a life for myself. Paying my mortgage, going grocery shopping, and supporting a family that never accepted me. Grace was bathed by me. On my hand, Richard nibbled. I remained supportive even after Ethan's company declared bankruptcy. I continued to give until I was quite exhausted. Just when I thought I was being forgotten, this happens. "Is it okay if I go?" I looked into Ethan's eyes and said quietly. He was uncertain. I didn't need anything else. I backed away slightly. Then still another one followed. I restrained myself from crying. I failed to hear a scream. Yeah, I did the same thing. That smile didn't belong to a defeated lady. Someone had only recently come to terms with her actual identity, according to the look on her face. "You feel like you've won?" I whispered gently. "But there's more to come." With my polished floored heels reverberating, I turned around and headed to the bedroom. My bedroom to salvage what little dignity I had left, for the simple reason that they omitted an essential detail. Beyond being a lady, I am more. I am a solicitor. The worst part is that they have turned me into their worst nightmare. Being thankful is what makes us human, they preach. On sometimes, however, it hooks us. Meeting Ethan Parker at the age of 29 was the final straw that broke my life's back. My dad passed away suddenly that spring, leaving behind a stack of unpaid debts and a rundown house in Denton. It was sad, but he wasn't reckless. When the attorneys began calling after his little construction business was engulfed by a catastrophic collaboration, his family name became a cautionary tale. While I was in law school, I worked night jobs, lived off of ramen, and tutored high school kids to make ends meet. Ethan appeared out of nowhere. He was more of an introvert. He was attentive while he did so. The dishes were made by him. He supported a girl who had struggled with anxiety for a long time. His remarks upon learning of the debt are etched in my memory. "Rebecca, you are not getting married for the money. I am making a proposal to you. Also, I'll talk to my parents about it. We'll work it out together." We finished. The Parkers immediately reached a $100,000 settlement. It wasn't charity. "There are certain," they denied. "An investment in family." Richard smiled and stated, "I was persuaded by them." 2 months later, we had a low-key courthouse ceremony to tie the knot. Keep it casual. Sturdy is not allowed. By this solemn oath, they could count on full repayment the moment I passed the bar and secured employment. Despite their best efforts, I remained certain it was crucial. When I had gotten over that bar, the way Ethan lifted me off the ground outside the courthouse while shaking his arms is something I will never forget. "I am proud," he declared. He exclaimed that I was the strongest woman he had ever encountered. I also put my faith in him. Our move to Austin followed shortly thereafter. I was employed by a medium-sized law firm. A Seattle IT company hired Ethan as an independent contractor. Life was simple before to Richard's fall. "This is bad. There was a break in his hip. Needs to be operated on. The doctors said he would walk again, but that getting healthy would take a long time and cost a lot of money. After that, I suggested we build them a new house. One level, there are no stairs, there are no hurdles. I felt obliged to repay their kindness in order to express my profound gratitude for their kindness. A plot of property situated exactly west of the Colorado River was bought by my firm and Ethan's co-working space about halfway between the two sites. Ultimately, the cost was close to $470,000. I stumped up the cash for the initial investment. For 30 years, I was the only borrower on a mortgage. A single twitch eluded me. Grace initially tried to raise an objection, saying it was too generous, but Richard still nodded slightly, although he said, "It's okay." Ethan nevertheless embraced me and extended his arm. "They consider this to be crucial. They may be confident that we will meet all of their requirements." They were brought in by me directly. Labeled light switches helped set up the thermostat and stocked the fridge as part of their bedroom setup. Once a week later, Grace took my hand and said, "You're not just a daughter-in-law, you're our daughter." Tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't stop crying even after all these years had gone, and the praise had dried up. At first, everything seemed quite little. Instead of using the bell, Richard would call out to me from across the house whenever he needed me. Grace would continually ask me to explain the same thing after scolding me for becoming upset. As the day progressed, Ethan started to stay put at his desk. The couple eventually started sleeping in the guest room just to get better rest. I should have spoken out. "You couldn't possibly have anything but praise for your rescuers, can you? Because I was powerful, that was my reasoning. They were owed money by me. This was the embodiment of love, tranquil, patient, and endless. It wasn't automatic that the mortgage was paid off. 60 hours a week is something I do occasionally. Never once did I let that deter me from going back to my house to lend a hand with the cooking, cleaning, directing Grace to the restroom when she became disoriented, and helping Richard get onto his chair when his back hurt. It seemed like no one cared about my well-being after Dad passed away. No one checked on me to make sure I was okay. That one instance, I expressed my overwhelming feeling to Ethan, that I was losing all sense of direction and energy. "My darling, just hang in there. It will get better, I promise," he said while massaging my back. He went off to play Call of Duty non-stop for 6 hours, but I kept going. The reason being that I was still thinking about Richard's deeds. Grace spoke these words. Anything that Ethan had promised, and promises, I felt a deep connection to them. I didn't realize they weren't the same to them until much later. Grace would sometimes catch Olivia's glance as she whispered something into her ear. Afterwards, Grace would flash me a mischievous smile. I had Ethan all worked up when I brought up the joint account. Although Richard had already informed me that there's nothing for you, he still refused to show me the mailbox. Nonetheless, I've decided to disregard it. Because of my strength, I was the strongest. For the simple reason that I always thought that family was paramount. After so long of existing, I failed to see that I wasn't really living. 2 years passed, 13 and 14. Their relentlessness drained me of strength one by one till I was practically drained. I was unharmed, actually. A final mortgage payment will be made, and I was prepared for it. If only I could regain my independence. Maybe if they could see what I had given up, they would value me more. Except I was incorrect. I was immediately thanked. They were about to throw me out. It happened on a Tuesday. Here we are on a typical Tuesday, with the sun setting just so through the kitchen window, and the scent of cinnamon filling the air from the candle you lit after work. I was almost done loading the dishes when it happened. The final mortgage payment completed that morning, exactly 13 years ago. I even saved the confirmation email in my inbox as if it were a precious treasure. I have mixed feelings about it. With a glass of wine in hand, I stood by the refrigerator, and a wave of feeling that I hadn't felt in a while swept over me. Joy came back, but that second was gone in an instant. When Ethan walked in, he found a bottle of craft beer that he had brought home already broken open. Sitting across the island, he had a wide grin, as if he had won the lottery, his arms resting on the counter. "Since the house is paid for, I think we should rejoice," he said. I simply blinked. There was not a single moment when he even mentioned the mortgage. He never once checked the bank statements I kept on display in my office, asked how much was still owed, or even offered to make a contribution all these years later. My eyes darted away. What gives with this unexpected interest? In between shrugging, he drank from his glass. "You have my utmost admiration, my darling. Excellent work. Plus, I think you should get a big bonus like a weekend getaway for that. Napa, maybe just you. Going on vacation, following years of icy silence and icy meals. It failed to persuade me. Still, I wanted to, so I smiled. I like the sound of that. As we approached near, he reached out and kissed my hand, just as he has done before. And for a split second, I gave in and believed the lie. 3 days after I got off work, I found the living room packed with people. "Greetings, I am Ethan, the folks who brought him up." "Hi, Olivia." Everyone sat as if they were about to have an intervention. Beside the entryway, I dropped my briefcase. What is going on? Richard stood up first. He carried a manila folder in one hand and wore that contorted, smug smile when he intended to say something unpleasant in the other. "You have been an incredible asset to this family, Rebecca," said the judge. "Rest assured, destroy it. However, now that the house is paid off, we can discuss what comes next." I didn't agree with the direction things was going. Grace straightened her posture and pursed her lips. With her arms crossed and her eyebrow lifted, Olivia shot me a stern glare. Even if he tried, Ethan would never look up. I inquired with utmost care because the word "next steps" is somewhat vague. The package was removed by Richard. Included were the deed transfer documents that were signed, notarized, and dated 2 weeks ago. He made the official announcement that the house had been sold to Benjamin and Olivia. "Please vacate by the end of the week." My heart rate dropped. Stepping back, I held on to the side of the couch. Say my name. It was I who bought this house. Exactly 1 cent. Absolutely not. A harsh, "It was never yours," was removed by Grace. The normally soft and meandering words she uses become as transparent as glass. Olivia interjected, adding, "You built it for the family." P said, "And now the family has decided on the best way to use it." I was suddenly really thirsty. "Did you invent this? My goodness, you rechristened me." Suddenly, Ethan looked up at the sky. You signed the tax papers 6 months ago. You added them to the title, and you gladly gave them over. No one faked any documents. It's evident that you didn't read the refinancing paperwork carefully. My stomach turned. Olivia claims the purpose of the document was to simplify inheritance filings. Unfortunately, I completely forgot about it, and exhaustion had set in. My calendar was jam-packed. I trusted them. "Why would you subject me to this?" I said. "What would be the purpose?" Grace smiled, keeping the same smile that she gave me when she told me she'd never seen a professional lady who appeared disconnected from her family's values. Gently, she went on to say that they had thought you would be grateful, but that you had started acting as though you were the sole tenants. Laughter escaped Rick's lips. In my experience as a live-in nurse with a law degree, "Rebecca, you were always just the help." Having worked up the nerve to get up, Ethan did so. "Rebecca, I'm at my breaking point. Yes, I would like a divorce. For a long time now, this marriage has failed to function." As I locked eyes with him, my ears pricked up. A partition. There was a total surprise attack, with zero prior warning or conversation. "You knew?" I whispered. "This was all part of your master plan." He remained mute about the matter. My legs were about to give up. The world around me seemed to be submerged in a sea of muffled and twisted noise. "What was that? Just a down payment for this betrayal," I said in reference to the debt. "The money I paid back to your family, all of it." "All I did was shrug, Richard. We built a house with your aid, and you got back on your feet with our assistance. In my opinion, we're on equal ground, similarly positioned. Will it ever work?" I had cleaned their floors, taken Grace to all of her doctor's visits in style. Like a senile employee, I put in a lot of time and effort just to get fired. Also, that was considered equal. I turned my wrath on Ethan. I wanted to know if there was any kind of affection between us in my query. He said nothing. Another way to respond is to remain silent. Olivia fixed her shirt as she stood up. "Since the marriage has ended and the house is no longer yours, you may as well begin packing." Floating in after her is Grace's voice. "And deposit your key too. Don't forget it." Something ancient and evil was churning in my breast. I remained completely silent, finished sobbing, opted not to plead. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that every one of their faces was frigid. Suddenly, I felt a grin creep across my face and my back straighten. "Oh, I apologize, but that wasn't it. A vow that was kept." I cautioned, "You'll regret this," while maintaining a stern tone in my voice. "Rebecca, I don't know what you're going to do." A chuckle escaped Richard's lips. Personally, I retrieved my briefcase, almost skimmed past them. "Continue climbing the set of stairs. Shut the door after that." They thought I had accomplished my goal. They had forgotten about me. However, they were completely unaware of their adversary. They made the biggest mistake by relying on me. What is the next step? Because of me, their worst fear was going to be realized. I had a restless sleep that night. I crouched on the edge of the guest bed, staring at the partly packed bags beside me, because apparently I was no longer allowed to use the main bed. No matter what happened to my toothbrush, or clothes in the bathroom, or closet, I had already been kicked out of a deeper realm than my physical body. They took over my house, my marriage, and my sense of belonging. However, the most distressing aspect was the lack of sound. There was no one else around. I was alone when no one came to see how I was doing. People I used to think of as kin had vanished into thin air. My decision was made by dawn. Before the sun came up, I quietly left the house. I refrained from pounding on the door or leaving a note of any type. Just as they had anticipated, I collected up all of my possessions and vanished. Still, I didn't take off running. I turned my attention back to the company. I checked into a little extended stay apartment on the outskirts of Austin. There is simply one bedroom with extremely thin wall, and hot water is not accessible after 9 p.m. Still, it was mine. It had been a long time since anyone had yelled insults at me. As I walked down the hall, tossed soiled laundry, or asked why dinner wasn't ready. The place was deserted, horrifyingly quiet. I ate the salads that came in the package, finished my chores by staying up late. Away from curious onlookers, I silently cried in the shower. I finally had a late-night phone call. That specific number has eluded me for months. Good day, Benjamin, sibling of Ethan, the stain-covered Parker kin. He was a Marine before becoming a contractor. He and Olivia just got a divorce, apparently. After that, I took a pause. After that, I started climbing. He spoke forward and said, "Rebecca, I heard what happened." I waited calmly. The transfer of the deeds and the divorce were entirely unknown to me. Olivia denied knowing anything and said it was just a tax issue. "I can't believe she completely ignored you," he moaned. I didn't say a word. "Listen," he said, "if you are seeking support, here I am. I'm not obligated to earn your trust. No one else there deserves it as far as God is concerned." Just hearing his words made my pulse race. I am not sympathetic. Nothing wrong. Anger. I infuriated him. Suddenly, I felt like I wasn't so isolated. A wayside cafe the next day was where we reunited. I couldn't identify the scar on his temple, and he seemed thinner and older than he actually was. Nonetheless, his countenance remained unchanged, not because of my position as your ex-brother-in-law. "I wish to fix this," he says. "Instead, I am well versed in the outward manifestations of betrayal. Additionally, I have donning that symbol. A flash disk was shown to me. Start then." Everything was included within financial records. Olivia finds out the truth about Ethan. Records indicating the manipulation of the refinancing. Grace sent Olivia texts in which she sarcastically mocked me and plotted my sneaky eviction. Richard also addressed the legal gray area of asking for a signature without full consent in an early email draft. Beyond that, there was more going on. An attack was executed according to plan. Additionally, I had receipts. I logged into the company's client database later that night after turning on my laptop. After that, I made one call. I am Marcus Duvall. This senior partner served as both my mentor and the person who assigned me my first case. Even before I could continue, he stopped me. He confidently stood up and declared, "I'm in. Let's lay them to rest." Over the next 2 weeks, I was inundated with emails, coffee, and analyzing evidence. I gave Ethan's papers that he supplied me just for review a thorough once-over. Every single one of his stored login passwords on the Google Drive we supplied. The voicemail of Elizabeth. While conducting a remote deposition in the living room, I had unknowingly recorded footage from my laptop's webcam. Every time they yelled, made fun of, or cornered me. They had no clue that I had been taping. It was as if the camera hadn't rolled once, but I managed to get it done. Also, authentic timestamps were put in place to preserve every recorded and written time. In the meanwhile, Benjamin was quietly working away. He challenged the deed on the grounds that it had been executed under duress and without his consent or knowledge. Around the same time, Marcus filed the lawsuit, financial extortion, emotional abuse, and constructive fraud. Olivia was listed as someone who eagerly participated in the fraudulent transfer of property. Just refusing wouldn't have cut it. We were destroying their whole plan. The confrontation ensued. On a Thursday at 1 o'clock, I asked the person in charge of our company's reception to arrange for a meeting space. At exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Ethan, Richard, Grace, and Olivia walked in as if they were ready for combat. Nobody told them that we were in charge. As I sat across from Marcus and Benjamin, they were on each side of me. There was complete silence for 30 seconds. Last but not least, Ethan said, "What is this? Across the table I slid a folder. Included are photocopies of all relevant paperwork, according to Grace's bank transactions. Medical records, film stills, text threads, and a diagnosis of mild cognitive fog, rather than dementia, was the official diagnosis. I told them this is where you lay out your case." With an attempt at humor, Ethan said, "This isn't a courtroom." Interjecting, Marcus said, "No, but it will be." He then proceeded to extract a letter, which would serve as the official notice of the litigation. I became White Olivia. Richard was frozen in place. Grace then looked at us, anxiously wanting to know if lunch was still on the table. "Is Ethan okay?" His body gave way. "Question, what is it that you want?" That was his statement. I got up. "Please give me back my house. It is my desire to have my name cleaned. Every dime you stole from me, and every night I dreamed you loved me, should be repaid." Making direct eye contact with each one of them, I drew near. "And first and foremost, you were unable to break my will, and I hope you knew that." The signal was lost, able to not do it, for the simple reason that they had never previously been rendered silent. They left, and I stayed in that room by myself, not due of a lack of strength on my part, and for reasons other than the fact that I craved the taste of success while I was alone. Nothing was made. There was no explosive potential. There was no dirtiness. Yes, exactly. The truth seemed to be peering through the fog. Just existing wasn't cutting it anymore. I was tasked with rebuilding. When was this, according to my judgment? One of the scheduled court dates was April 3rd. It was quite some time before the altercation began, though. In Marcus's case, the 4 defendants were given their proper names: Ethan, Richard, Grace, and Olivia Parker. Can you tell me the charges coercion based on money, emotional manipulation, and constructive fraud, and civil dishonest theft? The conflict included more than simply a piece of property. They used my bending, stripping, and twisting for almost 13 years of my life to their benefit. The objective was to make sure they wouldn't hurt anyone else again. The media went ballistic. A highly regarded lawyer led by her own in-laws to abandon her home after paying off the mortgage in full. The news was pervasive, appearing on local blogs, legal podcasts, and morning radio. However, none of that worried me. What mattered most was coming into the courtroom honestly and with self-assurance. A brisk courtroom was the scene. Under the hum of fluorescent lights, each step seemed to be attempting to create an impression. Ethan appeared to have shed a significant amount of weight. Worried, uneasy. His tie was not quite right. Grace wore a purple shawl every morning, and I would help her find her worn leather wallet. Looking across the room, she couldn't help but feel as if she were at a brunch rather than a civil trial. Richard sat still, arms crossed. His countenance betrayed an attitude of defiance. Olivia as well. She didn't even look at me once. All right then. It was unnecessary for them to examine it. It was vital that they fulfilled their duty. The retirement of the venerable Justice Harper from the bench was met with minimal pomp and circumstance. Characteristics of her personality included candor and memory. There would be no way to avoid repercussions in her courts. When Marcus started writing the synopsis, it was easygoing and uncomplicated. I had dutifully paid off the mortgage and attended to all of my family's needs, and he brought up the topic of sacrifice, years of marital servitude, emotional gaslighting disguised as responsibility, and a legally organized fraudulent transfer were among the incidents he described. The bills were handed to him, the messages sent using electronic means, the altered documents. My calls for help are answered with contempt, apathy, and rejection. Yet the video doesn't move. The movie came next, straight from the webcam on my laptop, the one that they failed to detect the entire time. Ethan told Grace that she should just fake it if she had to. Despite her inability to read her own signature, Olivia thinks it's funny that I walk around like she owns the place. Richard should never have trusted a woman who makes more than her spouse. There was no sound. The music is not dramatic. Complete silence free from pretense. The judge leaned back once the movie ended. Initially, she hesitated to speak. Afterwards, she met Ethan's gaze. She asked Parker with an air of formality, "Do you have any thoughts about this footage?" Ethan got to his feet slowly. She was taping, and I had no idea. This wasn't the end. Evil, you understand. Incorrect reply. Harper exhibited fearlessness. It appears that our observations have been acknowledged. Does it really matter that you were caught? The entire courtroom went silent. Ethan sat down. Grace then made an effort to speak. Her lawyer did unfortunately object. Redirecting his grip, she did it delicately. And she said, "I'm a sick woman." And she meant it. My memory isn't great, and I become totally bewildered every once in a while. Harper raised an eyebrow. Are you officially deemed to be mentally incompetent, according to a medical diagnosis? It's official, Mrs. Parker. You're sworn in. Grace blinked. Olivia was the next target. No, she murmured into thin air. In their effort to shift the focus, the defense relied on the notion of an exaggerated family matter and an unclear distinction. Unfortunately, nobody was listening, missing the point of the video. Of course, once the financial trail has been closed. I mean, once I'd listened to my own voice pronounce, "Please, in addition to all else I do for you, I just want to be acknowledged once." The third day of the trial marked the beginning of settlement negotiations. They have decided not to let this problem drag on for another week of embarrassment and bad publicity. In our one-on-one meeting, Marcus offered me some advice. Repay the loan of $70,000. Full ownership of the house returned to me. The court record shows that all 4 defendants publicly and legally apologized. Prior to anything else, conditions of non-contact ordered by a judge. There would be no communication, no visits, and no return to my office from that group at all. If a violation were to occur, swift legal action would be instituted. Marcus was curious as to whether I intended to demand more. I was given the chance to do it. I had the reins of authority, the empathy, a position of absolute moral goodness. I also have another thing on hand, end of hostilities. Conversely, vengeance is not necessarily necessary for peace. Sometimes closure is required. I gave my assent by nodding. It can be accepted. Benjamin stood outside the courthouse waiting for us, with great patience as we left. I received a packet, including the recently verified notarized and clean deed paperwork from him. He uttered a gentle welcome home sound. Yeah, I did the same thing. After months of rejection, it appeared real. We thereafter became uninvolved. After that, according to Benjamin, he moved to Arizona. Grace and Richard currently live in an apartment building near Waco for seniors and divide the rent. 2 months later, Olivia and Benjamin filed for a dissolution of their marriage when she realized how little she could contribute to the settlement. She went to work additional hours at a department shop. That was satisfactory to me. There was no need for that. The truth was all that was required regarding myself, but I renovated the home. Gobs of paint all over the walls. Got the door locked. All of their linens, including dishes, drapes, and pillows, were given as donations. As a monument to the possessions they plundered from me, it failed to resonate with me. It demonstrated what I could restore, completely on my own, not with a standing ovation, witnesses not present. To put it plainly, power, an option that does not need prior approval. Forget about asking for forgiveness. In the words of ChatGPT, the house is completely silent today, compared to the oppressive quiet of bygone days that was new. The silence here has significance. Peaceful, solid as a rock, like the peace that comes after a storm when you may go barefoot outside and be one with nature. 14 months have passed since the case shut. At last, my house is mine in every significant sense. I always seem to walk past the fireplace on my way to the coffee maker in the morning as I traverse the living room. That's where Grace would pretend to be forgetful and where Richard would bellow orders like a retired general who confused compassion for weakness. Right now, there aren't any of them living here. Even their own shadow can't. A palette of soft olive greens and warm whites now graces the walls. This couch is completely new. I am a part of this, just like the front door, the locks, the flooring, and the light fixtures. I clung to a single object, the kitchen counter with the dent. When Ethan dropped the carving knife on Thanksgiving long ago, he screeched as if he had broken a priceless artifact. I broke down in tears. The recollection of the moment before our relationship became a strategic move is still very much with me. I clung to it not because it made me happy, but then I remembered you used to laugh at the person who cheated on you. I continue to have no remorse about helping them out. I forgot who I was when I was immersed in it. The remainder of my lifetime, it is completely full. Last quarter, I was promoted to the position of Senior Litigation Counsel, and I am still working with the firm. Carrying a heavy workload keeps me focused. I speak at shelters and health centers twice a month, sharing my story of surviving a marriage marred by financial and legal exploitation. Some of them cry out in pain. Contrary opinions exist. Some remain silent and hunkered down as they flee. Even so, a bit subsequently they climb. I thought I was insane, they say. Initially, I thought I was alone by myself. I inform them of the truth. Do not be concerned. Remain courageous. You possess great strength. You may count on my assistance. If any working women ever find themselves victims of domestic abuse, I have started a women's advocacy group named Second Foundation to help them through the legal process. One thing we teach them is how to record, methods for ensuring the security of important articles, tip for recognizing red flags whether they pose as wedding vows or Sunday dinners. For some reason, that is my deepest wish. As a result, I crafted it exclusively for their benefit. Likewise with my situation. From time to time, Benjamin and I strike up discussions. On very occasion, figured out, he stops by Austin to check in. At the very conclusion of each call, he always says, "The amount I owe you is greater than you realize." As a rule, my answer is, something escaped us both. 6 months after the case, he and Olivia broke up. In the end, he sold their homes. Fresh starts close to San Antonio. He seems lighter than he actually is. Very much so. I get asked all the time how I managed to forgive them. No way. Ultimately, self-forgiveness was necessary. The reason being that they lasted much too long. I am too innocent in my love for prioritizing my devotion over my own exhaustion. The real betrayal was letting go of my own love for another. Doing it again will not happen. Not meant for anyone. What exactly have I found? Absolutely everything. My newfound understanding is that love is just olfactory control. Partnerships, not contracts, best describe marital unions. Being the only investor also disqualifies it as a partnership, a subject you are. My experience has shown me that financial abuse may take many forms. Conflicts involving physical contact or aggression are completely unrelated. At other times, there is complete silence. Our term for it is gaslighting. Believing while you're exhausted and signing a document is what it means. They said you're too emotional for pointing out that the figures don't add up. Above and above anything else I came to see, that strength does not necessarily mean perfection. Knowing how to better build oneself is what it means. Greater strength, wiser, worthy. This house is filled with new laughter. Wine nights are when friends come over. While I'm in the kitchen, I put on some tunes. Putting fresh flowers on the table is a weekly ritual. Not because the cost is covered by someone else. Conversely, I do. That I believe is all. No, nothing more.